Hey people, what's up? This is boy Ari in Beijing, right back at you with another episode on how to learn any language you want to fluency. And today I'm going to be talking about why language classes, how do I put this, suck. So otherwise known as the story of how I spent almost a decade studying Latin and was nevertheless, after the end of that, not able to read a single word, versus spending about a year or two studying Mandarin, after which point I got myself a video channel speaking in Mandarin with millions of views. Why do language classes suck so much? I'm gonna get more detail into the rest of this video, so stick around. I definitely don't mean to say that all language classes suck, but most of them do, and the reason is that they miss out on the golden trifecta of memorization, speaking, and listening. Alright, so the main reason language classes suck is that there's no spaced repetition. There's no concept of reviewing stuff that you've already learned. I mean, they try to do it a little bit on midterms and finals, but generally, the way language classes work is like this. You read one textbook, you memorize the vocabulary, and then you go straight on to the next textbook and the next dialogue, and there's a lot of new vocabulary, but you're not really regularly reviewing the old vocabulary. And usually what this leads to, and I know this from personal experience having taught Chinese, is that you get into this situation where, at the end of the year, you've forgotten most of the vocabulary that you've had in the beginning of the year. And you can go check out the video I did on spaced repetition to really understand the principles behind reviewing regularly what you've learned in the past. But for the most part, language learning classes, they don't do this, and so most people just forget what they learned last class. Next up, limited speaking practice. So in most cases in language classes, you're just listening to the teacher talk, or like you're doing some exercises, but you're rarely speaking with native speakers. And that's really, not good. Because to actually learn a language well, you have to speak. I don't think I've ever met anybody who knows language well without speaking it regularly. And I think you have to constantly be in exposure to native speakers, and you have to constantly be producing that output in order to get practice in the thing that you want to get good at. Particularly, if you want to be good at speaking the language, there's no, way you can get good at speaking the language without speaking it. It's just not, without practice speaking it. It's not possible, right? So most language classes do not emphasize speaking nearly enough. With regards to vocabulary, most language learning classes do not emphasize vocabulary nearly as much as they should, right? So when I was doing Latin, every week, every new chapter, there'd be a list of vocab that we learn, and, we go through that year after year. But then when it finally came time for us to actually read these ancient Roman authors, we'd get into these books, and I'd have to look every single word up, literally every other word I'd be looking up in the dictionary. What language teachers don't usually impress on students is how much vocabulary you need to learn in order to be good at a language. So you've got to be using software like Anki or Memrise to be really drilling these words into your brain, and just you need to know so much in order to get yourself to a native speaker level. So this is a fun one. Outdated textbooks, right? So a lot of language learning classes, the textbooks they use are really old. They're decades old. And even if they're not decades old, even if they're only 10 years old, slang changes pretty fast. And so, in my Chinese classes, for example, we sometimes use this textbook called Integrated Chinese, which is probably the best textbook for learning Mandarin. But, even in this textbook, which is really good, all the time we encounter words that are not what a native speaker would use. And that's kind of shitty, because if you're trying to get good at a language, you can't be using words from the 50s. If you're learning English, you can't be saying things like, oh, top of the morning to you. You can't be saying top of the morning if you're talking to Americans, right? And I see this in textbooks all the time, and just textbooks are not great for this reason. And language learning classes, they mostly are based on textbooks, so you really have to watch out for that. Last but not least, and certainly actually maybe first, is that most language learning classes, and there are definitely some exceptions, don't emphasize listening practice enough. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, I think listening is one of the most important skills you can build in a language, and it's really hard. And to get good at listening, you have to train yourself on lots and lots of native level audio very regularly. And so, in most classes, you're doing exercises, you're maybe reading aloud from a textbook, teacher's calling on you. But listening practice with massive amounts of audio is something you need to train yourself on early and often, and most language learning classes, do not emphasize that enough. Like, if you want to be able to understand TV news in any language, which is very hard, at 100% comprehension, you have to be plowing through lots and lots of audio, and 99% of language learning classes are not going to be doing that for you. So I definitely don't mean to imply that language learning classes always suck. Like, sometimes they can be really good. I took a very intensive summer Chinese class one time that was really amazing. 2 months, they sit you in a room, you have to speak English, you have to speak Chinese all the time, otherwise they kick you out of the program, one of those. And that was an incredible experience, precisely because it emphasized speaking and listening and all this good stuff. But I would say that the vast majority of language learning classes are genuinely not good, and I think the best thing they give you is like motivation and structure. But to really learn a language well, you need to be emphasizing speaking, memorization, listening, lots of vocab, all this good stuff that you can find out. Here's where the plug comes in, by subscribing to my channel, or checking out some of these videos that I'm gonna link to at the end. Anyway, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week, and have a good day.